Aitha, for not having that love for my parents like I used to. I was raised in a devout family and reside in a pious nation. As the youngest female sibling, I have an older brother, a father, and a mother. For as long as I can recall, I have lived a joyful life with my family, free from difficulties. They would often indulge me, spoil me, and pamper me, among other things. I was a very energetic child compared to my brother, who was more laid back and composed, and I learned to speak before he did. I was quite self-aware for my age, but I struggled to comprehend complex emotions and feelings. Everything was going smoothly until I began to gain awareness. As I continued to grow, I started reflecting on certain moments from my childhood that seemed unusual. I think it all began in the 2nd grade, while attending a private school, where I felt as though the entire world was against me. My academic performance was not impressive, and my parents frequently compared me to my brother, who was the intelligent one. I often faced physical punishment from teachers using wooden rulers for not knowing answers or failing to complete assignments due to a lack of understanding. My classmates were uninterested in forming friendships with me. None could be considered a true friend. When I attempted to share one of my hobbies, they would look at me with judgment. I do not recall much from that time, so we can skip to the 3rd grade, when I transferred to another private school where my mom worked, all the way up to the 9th grade. Once again, the same unfortunate cycle occurred. I would attend school, struggle academically, face humiliation or physical punishment, return home to encounter similar treatment from my parents, and then repeat the same pattern the following day. I noticed that whenever I made mistakes, the teachers were quick to inform my mother, who would either punish me at school or wait until we got home. The teachers would often utter absurd comments like, "Why don't you know the answer?" whenever I struggled to respond to a question. There was no improvement in the behavior of my classmates either, although between the 3rd and 6th grades, I did manage to make a few friends until the 6th grade, that is. However, skipping over the details of the repetitive cycle, there was a particular incident in the 9th grade when I was 13 years old. During physical education class, I found myself in conflict with a girl who had an inflated sense of self-importance and believed all attention should be focused on her. After some back and forth name-calling, which wasn't particularly significant, I returned home to find that my mother had received a call from that girl's mother, claiming I had harassed her daughter. My mother asked me if this was true, and without allowing me to explain, she lost all control and began to strike me. I received a severe beating, including hair pulling, slapping, and multiple hits to my head, and soon my father got involved. I had hoped my father would intervene on my behalf, but he, consumed by his own anger, sided with my mother and joined in the assault, while my brother kept to himself in his room. It felt as though the beating lasted for half an hour. When they finally ceased, I shakily turned off the lights and closed my door before collapsing onto my bed, sobbing uncontrollably. The impacts to my head were so severe that I remember it hurting tremendously when I rested it on the pillow. That night, I cried myself to sleep. The following morning, I woke to swollen eyes, a small but evident bruise on my jaw, and another on the side of my temple. I went to school and shared what had happened with my friends, hoping for empathy, hoping they would recognize that it was not my fault. They expressed concern but offered no comforting words. From that day forward, I believed that no one in my life would support me. I was certain everything was always my fault. My religion emphasizes respect and obedience towards parents, but the issue lies with the culture. Many traditional societies place parents on a pedestal, even to the extent that they can mistreat their children without consequence, simply because they are parents. They provide for us, which seems to justify their behavior. Things became somewhat quieter in the 10th grade, for which I was grateful. By the 11th grade, I observed an improvement in my situation. I transferred to a public school, my academic performance improved, I felt less anxiety, and for the first time, I was eager to attend school and learn without feeling judged by everyone. My parents commended me for my efforts, which felt incredibly rewarding. Unfortunately, a new issue arose. With my improved grades came heightened expectations. If I were to receive a lower mark, it would shatter their hopes, as happened with my father. It seemed I could never satisfy them. Nevertheless, the school year progressed well, leading into my senior year of high school. Everything was going smoothly until an intense argument erupted between my parents over school-related matters. Alone in my room afterward, my thoughts wandered back through the years I had endured. There had been happy moments, yes, but I felt the overwhelming majority of my memories were negative. I recalled my mother's tendency to yell and hit me for the slightest mistake, how my father would refuse accountability for his wrongdoings and instead blame us, and how my brother occasionally hit me without any intervention from our parents, including him. I remembered their threats to withdraw me from school and have me clean houses, considering me useless. I would lie awake each night, worrying about what the next day would bring. At lunchtime, my father consistently highlighted a flaw in either my brother or me. Each time, they acted as if nothing had happened and returned to their usual ways. The frequency of their arguments left me feeling overwhelmed, particularly given how quickly my father would become angry, making me feel as though I were walking on eggshells around him. One misstep, and I was in trouble. I recognized how, over the years, I had developed depression at a young age, often asking myself, why did God allow me to exist in this world, merely to suffer? I contemplated suicide several times, though I never found the courage to go through with it. I stopped eating, which made me extremely weak, leading to deficiencies in iron and vitamins C, D, and A. I experienced hair loss, lost interest in showering, and struggled to rise in the morning. Even the simplest tasks felt insurmountable. The situation deteriorated to the point where I became a people pleaser, unable to tolerate anyone disliking or being angry with me because it reminded me too much of my parents. They instilled in me the belief that I should never correct them, even if they were in the wrong and their actions were harmful. As I reflected on all of this, my perspective on my parents shifted entirely. I do not harbor hatred for them. In fact, I could never do so. I also do not consider myself blameless. However, I felt the love between us gradually diminish, little by little. Consequently, I started behaving differently toward them. I no longer laughed with them as I once did, refrained from joking around, and kept my daily experiences to myself, including my hopes and dreams, because they only seemed interested in hearing what they wanted to hear. Naturally, they noticed this change. How could their daughter, who had once been so loving, so clingy, and so dependent on them, act in this manner? They inquired about my well-being, but did I tell them? No, why would I? They would simply dismiss my feelings as they typically did, claiming that it's all just in your head or that I was overreacting. Unsurprisingly, they were not pleased with my behavior. And predictably, who did they blame? Me. They accused me of being ungrateful and disrespectful, all the usual accusations. Yet, I had heard these words countless times before, and they affected me far less than they had in the past. Previously, I would become emotional, pleading for forgiveness for offenses that were not mine. I had grown numb to such feelings and learned to convince myself that it is not always my fault, even if it is challenging to do so. Did it hurt? Certainly, coming from the people who raised me, it would inevitably hurt. At one point, my mother suggested taking me to a psychiatrist, which caused my father to explode in anger, condemning it as shameful and humiliating and insisting that we were not crazy. One day, while we were all fasting, I prepared to break my fast with a few dates, but noticed they appeared dried out or spoiled. I asked my mother, "Are these the dates you took from the box?" She confirmed, and I quietly muttered "you" in reference to the dates, not my mother, but the dates. Naturally, her narcissistic tendencies kicked in, leading her to yell an array of insults over a handful of dates. Soon, my father joined in, and what began as a minor misunderstanding escalated into something akin to a dramatic scene from a movie. You might wonder why I failed to explain myself. Quite simply, if I attempted to speak, she would accuse me of talking back and retaliate harshly. Thus, I opted for what seemed best, staying silent and nodding. It feels never-ending. She continued to say that she hadn't raised me properly, that I would abandon them in a nursing home, that my brother was superior, and that I held myself in high regard. To clarify, my brother was studying in another city at the time, and I was the one who would text him to remind him to call our mother. Furthermore, I certainly do not think highly of myself. I simply want to maintain my personal boundaries and prefer that no one enters my room when we have guests. The situation deteriorated to such a degree that I now dislike physical affection from my parents, whether it be kisses or hugs. I do not harbor hatred for them. Genuinely, I do not. I love them, but tolerating their behavior is increasingly challenging, and I worry about how much longer I can endure it. I cannot leave home to start my own life, as tradition dictates that I, as the daughter, am expected to care for them in their old age. They raised me, provided for me, and clothed me, but that does not excuse their behavior. It feels as though their actions have no repercussions in the afterlife simply because they are my parents, and they often assert that I will be the reason they do not attain heaven. Am I the one at fault?